want to welcome you to the Inman First Baptist Church parlor. We are here as a church staff talking about next steps, and we want to invite you to peer over our shoulders and listen to some of our conversation. Our next step process allows us to capture the why behind what we do as church, everything we do as church. And we understand that we are following the command of our Lord Jesus, who said the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love others, your neighbor as yourself. And so we've distilled that into loving God and loving others. It's a little bit easier to carry around something that brief. And that gets at the DNA of our church, everything we do as church. And of course, in a real sense, everything any church does is appropriately built on that kind of a foundation. Getting at that as we are looking at moving out of COVID and really starting over in many ways as church. So many of our ministries came to a close or shut down dramatically. So many of the things we did week to week, though many of our ministries continued, but we've had to slow down. Now we're beginning to see things open up, and we can begin to either restart or start over with some of our ministries. And so we've broken that process down into 4, hopefully more bite-sized pieces. And each of our staff members is responsible to work with one of those smaller groups to be a liaison and provide what leadership may be needed beyond what those leaders are doing. So I'd like for us to talk for a minute about the group we're working with. Kelly, you're working with the Growing Younger group, but tell us a little bit about that group and where they are now, but also what excites you about that group moving in the future.
Kind of to piggyback off what you were saying, I think this has been a great opportunity for us to look at our programs and the way that we do church and look at where we are and look at where we want to be. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I would love to see is that when a family enters our building, the first thing they see is that this is a space for families, that they are welcome here, that it's easy to tell where children are supposed to go, where their youth are going to go, that the environment is safe and clean and is welcoming to children in all generations. Because even though our Next Steps team is called Growing Younger, it doesn't mean that we want just young people in our congregation. We really want it to be intergenerational, because that is how a congregation thrives, is by having older members who are teaching younger members. And that is also how you keep younger people in church. We know that youth, when they graduate from high school and they go to college, are consistently leaving the church. And one of the things that has been found is that if they have those relationships with older members of the church, they can come back and feel like they're coming back home. And so I want for, at a young age, children to walk in and know this is a place for me. This is somewhere that I will be loved and accepted, even with all my rambunctiousness and excited behavior and everything, that I am going to walk in and there's going to be people of all ages that know my name and they welcome me. And then I want for parents to be able to see a check-in station where they know their child is going to be safe, but also an area that allows the kids to learn about Jesus in an age-appropriate manner. And so I am so excited to see what that might bring for our future.
Well, and one of the aspects of this Growing Younger is to repurpose some building space, which we have discovered as we've looked at the space in order to use it more for children and real small children and their families. We've discovered that that's the purpose for which that space was originally built.
Yes.
And so we're really, in that sense, we're not doing something new. We're going back to something that was done a long time ago and recapturing a very good plan, and that's allowing us to take advantage of some very desirable real estate near the sanctuary. Jeremiah, you're working with the virtual church team, and that's something that we didn't think about a generation ago or even a decade ago, but now has become very essential to church and how we do it and how we're going to be doing it in the future. Talk to us a little bit about your work with them and how you see that enlarging our ministry, not only to our church family, but to the larger community beyond us.
As we think about moving forward, one of the things we've noticed out of COVID is how important our online presence is. As we realize that more and more people, whether they can't come to church because of age or because they're traveling, continue to connect with our church through our online presence. And one of the things that piggybacks off of each of the things we're doing is, as we come out of these next steps out of COVID, we are almost in many ways recreating a space of worship. A space for worship for our young adults and families, for our senior adults, for everybody. And one of the things I learned a long time ago in Christian education and spirituality is people go where they are cared for and prepared for. So our virtual church team is helping to prepare for our online ministry in a deeper, more profound way. As we invite people to worship with us online, maybe because they can't come because of age or sickness, or because they're traveling, or maybe it's someone that has moved away and wants to continue to be a part of our church, making sure that they have a interactive and dynamic way of worshiping with us through technology. So our virtual church team is beginning a process of looking at our online worship and seeing ways that we can build it up, maybe through multiple cameras, through online visual graphics on our screen, so that it feels more like you're here in person. And it helps people stay connected to our church. But as we continue to build that online presence, one of the things we're hoping to be able to do is for people that may never come to our church to find a place where they can grow spiritually, even if they never come into the walls. So we are building space in a virtual place that gives people access to what it means to love God through worship, and how can they love one another even if they can't be here together physically. Two other teams from our next steps is our Legacy team and our Good Neighbor team. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the Legacy team, understanding that space is important, is looking not exclusively, but primarily at how do we maintain the physical space that we have achieved through multiple generations. Understanding that some of our next generations may not be able to resource this property, or even if they are, thinking about the gift we'll be giving to them if we can say to next generations, you do not have to be as concerned as we've had to be in maintaining the physical space. You can devote more of your resources, especially financial resources, to outright ministry, instead of having to say, okay, we've got to spend 50% of our budget on maintaining a building. We can lessen that percentage and be able to put more resources into other kinds of direct ministry. And so therefore the Legacy team is looking to build some sort of a financial piggy bank, if you will, that will allow future generations to use the interest off this foundation or these foundation resources, so that building and other ministry features can be funded in ways that allow the new generations, the next generations, to not be as concerned as we've been over paying for building stuff. I'm also working with people on the Good Neighbor team. That has been a dream of mine for a long time, to be able to know that when someone sets foot on our church property, especially on a Sunday morning, that they'll be met ideally at their car door and greeted warmly, and then if they're new to our church or to our church property, they'll be shown, not given directions, but they'll actually be guided directly to whether it's the sanctuary or to a Sunday school classroom, to the nursery, wherever they need to go. There'll be someone that will guide them and make sure that they not only get to where they need to go, but they'll be able to find their way back. But this Good Neighbor team not only will get people into the building, help them get out of the building, but they will help us find the ways to communicate with those first-time guests so that we begin building relationships with them, knowing that the better relationship we build with someone the first time that they visit with us, for whatever reason, the more likely they're going to come back and build an ongoing relationship with us. Talking about these different teams, it's obvious there's a lot of work to be done. And the only way this work's going to get accomplished is because we have good people leading these efforts. Not us, but we've got good teams. Each team eventually will have at least 4 people on each of them. And so that's 16 people that are going to be investing time and energy, their prayer efforts, and they're going to be recruiting other people as they encounter things that they need to draw others in as other kind of resources. But I'm asking our church family to pray for them and to encourage them as they encounter them, wherever they happen to bump into them, and understand that these people are doing vital work for the future of our church, and we appreciate that. So I'm excited about the people that are giving us leadership. And speaking of excitement, what are some of the things that excite you about this process or about the team you're working with? Just talk a little bit about things that maybe excite you.
I am excited to see the relationships that are built within our community and then just within our congregation as a whole. And then to see what comes out of that, because this is just the beginning.
Right.
These are just the very first steps of whatever God has planned for us.
Right.
And I cannot wait to see what that is.
Yeah.
As we come out of this season of COVID where we've been separated from each other, from our routines, the temptation would be just to go back to the way things were.
Right.
But I feel that this season has given us an opportunity to really discern, beginning before COVID when our deacons were praying, God, what would you want us to know, to be, and to do? That this season of kind of being still and discerning has given us a clear vision of where God's leading us. And these next steps are, as Kelly said, the first steps in a bigger journey that God's leading us to. One that allows us to begin setting a stage or building a foundation of a church environment that is more welcoming and inviting, not only for those on the outside, but even for us on the inside. That we can come to a place that is more hospitable and more loving out of a season where we felt like we didn't have any connection. And as we begin to build on these next steps, we know that God is leading us in areas of worship, in areas of ministry and outreach, and ministries of helping to shape our community. But before we can begin to do all of those big next steps, we have to take little next steps just to prepare the way, to build that foundation. And I am so excited that we've got good church leaders and other ministers within our church body that are helping to lead these next steps.
Thank you for joining with us in this conversation. I need to ask 2 things of you. One, please make our next steps process a matter of prayer, not just today, but for every day, for as long as you're hearing about next steps. And I must tell you, there'll always be a next step, because we're always in transition as we serve our Lord. Find something about which you have some genuine excitement, some passion, some drive, and you may find a way that you can plug into one of these leadership teams as a resource. It may be from a distance, it may be that they need you to come and sit with them a couple of times, or in some other way you can share some of your expertise or experience with them. But there's some way you can plug in. If nothing else, you can plug in through your prayers, and that is a very, very vital part of this process. Thanks again for joining with us in this conversation. Look forward to being a part of the next steps of Inman First Baptist Church.